Mark, very difficult time for cricket, but we've been regaled online, social media, with players really taking ownership of their stories, telling great stories, but the one that stood out for me was AB on what looked like a Skype call, a Zoom call, speaking about his future as a South African, well, a comeback for the Proteas. He was saying that during the Mzansi Super League, he had a chat with Bouch. Bouch asked him, where his enjoyment for this game comes from still at 36 years old, and then said to him, like, maybe you've still got a story to tell, AB's words. And the Zoom kind of interview followed on from that, where AB started to muse about the potential comeback with the Proteas. And I know you're a big fan of AB, and you wrote a piece for SA Cricket Magazine and for IOL. And I just wanted to pick your brain about that. I've got some thoughts, and I want us to flesh that out a little bit, but I just want to pick your brain about where you see this kind of stand.
Before we get to AB, I just want to say, you speak about the silly season of cricket. I feel like a night watching with my pads on. I just know when I'm going to go out to bat. It's fun, but it's not such lack of fun as well. So it's like when is a wicket going to fall, or when is play going to start? Yeah, it's a very frustrating time for cricket. I mean, and I've really missed it. I think of all the sports that I love and that I've covered and played, cricket is the one that I'm missing the most, and at all levels, T20, first class, and obviously Test cricket. AB, I think the fascination with age with a lot of people for me is when I wrote the AB piece, it's like good enough is old enough, whether you're 19 or whether you're 36. If we had a succession plan and you had 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the T20 side, because that's the one he's targeted if there's going to be a comeback, were flourishing, their strike rates were 140, they were kind of averaging in excess of 35. It's like time, there's no need for him to have come back. I look at him in the context of, I think the Proteas would be a better side currently with him back playing. If you look at his global average, and even if you look at his Proteas average, which is the worst out of all the leagues that he plays in terms of T20.
37, right?
No, he's averaging 26 in Proteas T20 and 37 generally.
Right.
But as these wonderful Indian statisticians keep on reminding us, you got to look at matches, you got to look at partnerships when he comes into bat, and it's not just the average, it's more so significant knocks and obviously the strike rate.
Right.
But he's the only one who's scored more than 1,600 runs that's currently playing. JP Duminy has the most, just under 2,000, and he's retired. But he's in the top 3 of South African batsmen, be it average and strike rates, and the only 2 who compare with him are Quinton de Kock and David Miller, who are still going to be integral to the T20 side moving forward. So for me, until there's another South African batsman that is eclipsing those numbers, and AB is playing overseas and playing in all these leagues, pick him. He's not saying I'm coming back for Test cricket. He's not even wanting to come back for ODIs.
Yeah.
I think where we potentially get it wrong with the media and then the public is seeing it as this comeback.
Right.
Because it's not like he's left the game and hasn't played cricket for 3 years. He's playing in the Big Bash. He's playing in the IPL. He's playing in Pakistan. He's playing in the West Indies. He's playing in the UK. And he's playing in our league as well.
Right.
If he's there and he's scoring runs, pick him. That's the point that I was arguing, because I still think he's good enough. And a couple of years ago, and I think you also wrote a piece about it for SA Cricket Magazine, when KP was kicked out of English cricket, he was touring the world and just smashing everything, especially in the Big Bash and IPL. He was one of the biggest stars. And he was actually eligible to play for South Africa because he had served that 3-year period of his last match for England. And he could play for South Africa because it's the country that he was born and raised in. People thought it was madness, and they kept on pointing to his age. Who the hell wants KP at 37? Who wants him at 38? I would have taken KP at 40, and I'd take AB at 40. I think they're still good enough. So my thing to people is to kind of go out the box, look at the performance of the player, be it in our local league or in the Big Bash, and if he's good enough, pick him. Don't see it as an AB de Villiers who's coming back from the wilderness and will he rekindle his old glories.
Yeah, I think what the counter what people would say is that there's a step up in quality from those local leagues that he's played in to international cricket, which is a legitimate question, but his record speaks for itself at that level even. I thought what was interesting, and you say it's not a comeback, it's not a comeback. Certainly a comeback to international cricket. And with the world gripped by the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan, I just, I'm a big MJ fan, and as an MJ fan, to watch him come back for the Wizards, age 37 or 38, was painful to watch. He averaged 20 in his first season, but it kind of just went like downhill from there. It was painful to watch, and then I started asking myself questions about how this applies to elite level athletes like that. AB is on that level. And I reread this book often, What Sport Tells Us About Life, with Ed Smith, former England cricketer. And there's a chapter in it called The Curse of Talent, and he speaks about the defining quality of all athletes at that level is almost an irrational belief in self. But it's also their downfall as they get to the end of their careers. And I thought about how that applies to AB's situation. And I hear what you're saying, but I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Like, does he come back, and is he still the AB we know at that international level? I hope he is, and I share your view that AB spoke about earning his stripes at domestic level and then getting a call up on that basis. Sure, it's the right thing to say, but this is AB de Villiers, right? I don't know, for himself, I suppose it'll make him feel more secure. But I don't think that AB de Villiers needs to go and play domestic cricket and then earn his stripes. He's there. But be that as it may, the pathway, whatever pathway he takes back to international cricket, and I believe he will come back based on what you were saying. You just got to ask yourself, is there a chance of him tarnishing his legacy in any way? Or do we look at it as this is a gamble we take, or a calculated risk we take, and we kind of live with the results either way?
I think if you look at some of the wonderful cricketers we've had locally and internationally, you take an Alan Donald. When the 145 went to 138, 140, he wasn't quite that bloke who was going to come in, especially in Test cricket, and break a big partnership after tea.
Right.
There was a difference in his menace and his strike rate in that last 6 months. Injuries came in and that kind of stuff. Herschel Gibbs, when the eye coordination went, he wasn't quite as flamboyant and kind of more vulnerable to get out early. Sachin Tendulkar in his last season probably got bowled more times than he'd been bowled in his whole career, or LBW. The eye just wasn't there, and the alertness and the quickness of reaction. So I think players know more than anyone else if they've still got it or they haven't got it.
Right.
As I said to you in the beginning, I would be asking exactly the same questions if AB had been in the wilderness for 3 years. And then it's like, shoot, has he got it? Are the feet still going to move?
Right.
But even though he hasn't played at international level, T20 since 2017, I think his last one was against Bangladesh, he has consistently been playing against the best bowlers in the world, playing for some of the best teams, even though it's not that international pressure. So the fact that he's making noises tells me that he believes that the feet are still moving.
Yeah.
He can still play the 360, play the clock against anyone.
Yeah.
And if I listen to the Virat Kohlis of the world, Kohli said he's the most skilled batsman he's ever seen across all three formats. And I think here you take a Tendulkar out the mix and Ricky Ponting, T20 coincided with the tail end of their careers.
Yes.
Jacques Kallis even to a degree. I think they're still fighting the dog, the older dog. Again, how do we manage him, and how do we build a middle order potentially around him? But what does AB bring to the international squad? And we've seen Rassie Erasmus do that magnificently with the Springboks. We saw the All Blacks, when they went 2011 to 2015, do it so well. Is they never kicked the Mia Lamu out. We never kicked the Skulk Brits out. We brought him back. They weren't necessarily playing every match or the go-to guys. But if you think of that fragile middle order at times with the Proteas, how much are they not going to learn from being around AB?
Sure.
So if there's 10 games, I'm not saying he starts every single one of them, but he's in the squad. He's there as a leadership role. He's kind of like a player/coach. And you want to get the big games out of him. Whether he bats at 3 or 5, he commands presence with the opposition.
It's important what you're saying there, because this is a constant theme, speaking to elite athletes, specifically rugby players. So I was speaking to, this is maybe 10 years ago now, speaking to Francois Hougaard, playing at the Bulls at the time, about Vrede Pre's presence, you speak about presence now, and he said to him, as a young scrum half, you're sitting in the change room next to Vrede Pre, that does something for you. And in a sport where you're looking for 1%ers, where the level of talent is fairly even, but every team is looking for that little 1%, that's a 1%. AB de Villiers sitting next to you in the change room, what that does for your confidence, for the collective confidence, is immense, I think.
I always go back to when I started writing cricket, there were these two pups who played for Province. One was Herschel Gibbs, the other one was Jacques Callis. And they both just come out of school. Jacques Callis played after his matric year. Herschel Gibbs played when he was in grade 10. Desmond Hayes was playing for Province, one of the great openers from the West Indies. Those two always constantly spoke about how much they learnt batting opposite him. Sean Pollock speaks about Malcolm Marshall. He said to basically open the bowling with Malcolm Marshall, to be at the nets with Malcolm Marshall, gave him a tutorship that he could never have got anywhere else. So I've always been a firm believer that if the personality of the player is such that he's willing to sit on the bench, that he's willing to be number 14 and not necessarily start, and he brings all those elements, then bring him back. And I think AB de Villiers is that kind of guy who could come into the mix, say to whoever the captain is, you get my full support, and would know that if he's formed it and warranted, he wouldn't want himself to play. But he is just so good and good a player. And he's carried this burden, I don't know if it's even been self-imposed since the 2015 World Cup, that he just feels like he's owed South Africa something, or he's owed South Africa a performance that is unrealistic as well. So no matter what he's done, people, if he succeeds, it's AB. He's supposed to. If he doesn't, it's like he's finished, he's gone. And I think we just need to still applaud him while we can, and use him while we can. And if he's got another year or 2 years in him, let's get those 2 years out of him and let him be phased out of the Proteas as opposed to dismissed, because we are spending the next 5 years investing in 23, 24, 25-year-old batsmen who are never necessarily going to make it or be good enough. And I've always had a problem with all sports teams who want to rebuild all the time. And you talk about The Last Dance. You talk about, and it's the last 2 episodes coming out this evening, it's the greatest sports documentary series that I've ever watched.
Same.
But this preconceived idea that they had to go. They were all too old. They had to be broken up. That squad potentially could have won another 3 with half of them still there and the new crew coming in. And we tend to have this obsession with age. Either you're too young, so you can't make it, we can't pick you, or, my God, you're too old. It doesn't matter that you're scoring, averaging 50. We still can't pick you. It doesn't matter that you're averaging 15 points a game as a rugby player. We still can't. You're too old to kick. So we need to break that mindset of looking at age and preconceived ideas and say, does this individual add value to a team? And by virtue of that, does their performance add value to the team? And I think AB de Villiers ticks both those boxes. Just when you see how the opposition talks about him, be it in the Big Bash, you know, I looked at him go to Australia in his first ever innings for the Brisbane Heat. He just turned it on. He arrived there on the Tuesday, I think, and turned it on the Thursday. The kind of following he has in the IPL, where he's batting opposite Kohli. And interesting enough there, he and Kohli, 37 averages there, they match each other shot for shot. Kohli is the only bloke in T20 history that averages 50 and a strike rate of over 130. The next best is 34, 32, 33. It's a bit like a Bradman in Test cricket when you look at Kohli's T20 average, and then the rest are down there. So,
which speaks to the weight of his statements about AB carries, right? Like, I mean, they obviously close with RCB and that type of thing, but I don't think Kohli is the type of guy to pay lip service to anyone for whatever. Like he's been known to say it as it is, and the weight that those statements carry was significant for me.
As you know, they asked AB de Villiers, Kohli or Tendulkar, and he said Kohli across all formats. They asked Kohli, who's the bloke that goes into bat for you? He said de Villiers. A lot of people scream, get them a room. You know, they should change him. But I just think it's wonderful that just many years ago, we did a cover on SA Cricket Magazine, and AB de Villiers had just broken in. He said, I don't want to be remembered as the best batsman in South Africa. I want to be remembered as the best batsman in the world. And he will go down as one of the great batsmen across all 3 codes. And if you go back to that innings he played against the West Indies, the pink one-dayer, 149. Just the way he played every shot. It didn't matter where he was, whether he was on. At times he was hitting the ball from square leg.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had moved away so much,
Right.
and it was just a masterclass to watch, and just to say I've actually seen this guy bat. And I just think I see our struggles in the last season too, in the ODI and the T20s, and how many players we're going through. And with the greatest respect to any player who plays international cricket, because to get there you can play the sport, but we are picking inferior players ahead of a guy who has proved himself time and again, and is one of the best that the world will ever see. And if AB de Villiers has the desire, I can tell you, the feet will be moving, the eyes will be there, and the runs will come.
I think with another key thing with AB is, I mean, so I'm sure that the readers and audience of SA Cricket Magazine understand the game technically. But if you've played the game at any sort of level, you know that the execution, the difference between a really good club cricketer or really good provincial first-class cricketer and an AB de Villiers is the ability to execute what he sees in his mind. And that again is something that I don't think we've shown AB enough appreciation for. So when you speak about the West Indies innings, even an elite first-class cricketer, that's his level, he's going to struggle beyond that, but even an elite first-class cricketer can't do that. And there are very few cricketers in the world that can do that. Kohli is one of them, perhaps David Warner, Steve Smith certainly. But that's a very small, maybe 10 players in the world, if that. It's a very small sample of hundreds of international cricketers. But beyond that, I think that when you, for instance, we were speaking about Jordan earlier on. Jordan was a reference point for what is possible for a generation of young kids. And use an American example, but AB is ours. AB is ours. There's an 8, 9, 10-year-old now watching AB, or back then, watching AB going like, this is a new kind of realm of what is possible in this game. And this is a reference point, and very few of them will get there. But if 5 do, that's significant for South African cricket. It's just a different kind of dimension of what he means to South African cricket.
Yeah, and I think if people look at, especially batsmen, and averages can be distorted depending on where you play, quality of the opposition, era that you play in. But the one thing that always stood out for me, a younger Herschel Gibbs, a younger Sachin Tendulkar, a Ricky Ponting, a Kevin Peterson when he was at his prime. Obviously Sachin was when the rest failed, they just looked like they were batting on the N1.
Right.
And AB innings at Centurion in a test match against Mitchell Johnson, who was, he was bowling 150 clicks, left arm, cutting them both ways. AB got 90 odd, when I think the next best was 10 or something like that. Great quality batsman, they win that top 6 of South Africa. And he just looked so unfazed. It looked like he had time on the ball, and that's the mark of a great batsman.
Yeah.
And just when I see some of the innovation and the creation that he's brought to T20 over the last decade,
Yeah.
all I'm thinking is, if you got 2 years, bud, geez, give it to us, and then go away.
Yeah.
But if you were asking me 5 years down the line, there's a story that this Oak AB de Villiers is coming out. He feels he can bat. I would think, oh my God, I hope he doesn't tarnish the legacy and people don't see him like we've seen him. And you know, it's been doing a lot of boxing viewing over the last month, watching all the old highlights packages of all the various codes. And when it comes to Michael Jordan, one of the great quotes that I read was, those who ask LeBron James or Michael Jordan, just go watch the tapes.
Yeah.
Because if you watch the tapes, you'll never make the comparison.
Yeah.
And we talk about AB like that.
Yeah.
We were there when he scored those runs. We were there when he had those innings. So someone who's maybe not as well versed with that bloke at his prime may say, is this other guy better? It was a bit when people said Faf was a replacement for Jacques Kallis. No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, no one was a replacement for Jacques Kallis.
Yeah.
It's only now that people will start to see it, and Jacques Kallis will be spoken about in 20 years as our generation spoke about Sobers.
Right.
Just like those stats will start doing more of the talking than performance. But I hope that AB comes back, reminds us, just for at least 1 or 2 seasons, of just what an absolute masterclass he can give, and just what an added value can be to a team. And I think post 2015, the way he left, the indecision over the last 3-4 years, how it clouded the public's view of him, that he picks his games, it's not an honor to play for the country. I think that's all crap. There's no one more passionate than that guy. And I think he needs to give himself the send-off that he never had in 2017.